I have presided over thousands of disputes. I've listened to people lie with confidence, tell the truth through tears, and destroy their own credibility with a single careless sentence. After enough years on the bench, you begin to believe there are very few surprises left inside a courtroom. Then this case arrived. Even today, I can still picture the folder resting on my desk that morning. The title looked ordinary enough, another civil dispute involving alleged police misconduct. Nothing about the paperwork hinted that before the day was over, my courtroom would fall into a silence so complete that even the court reporter stopped typing for several seconds. Believe me, that almost never happens. When the bailiff announced the parties, I watched everyone enter exactly as I always do. Most people assume judges spend those first moments looking at legal documents.
You're wrong. I study.
I say Eisens. The way people walk into a courtroom often tells me more than the first 20 minutes of testimony. The plaintiff entered first. His name was Samuel Brooks, a 78-year-old retired school janitor from a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. He walked slowly with the help of a wooden cane polished smooth from years of use. His gray suit had clearly been worn many times before, but it was spotless. Every button was fastened carefully. Every movement carried dignity instead of pride. What struck me wasn't his age, it was his eyes. I've seen fear before. I've seen grief. I've seen anger buried beneath forced politeness. Mr. Brooks carried something different. He looked like a man who had spent his entire life learning that surviving sometimes meant saying nothing. That expression stayed with me. Behind him sat several members of his family. His daughter, Angela Brooks, held a folder so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Beside her, two grandchildren exchanged nervous glances without saying a word. Families tell stories before they ever testify. Then the defendant entered, Officer Ryan Mitchell. 34 years old, decorated, confident, his uniform fit perfectly despite being off duty. His badge reflected the courtroom lights as though it had been polished moments before walking inside. His attorney carried himself with the calm confidence of someone convinced this would be another easy victory. Officer Mitchell never looked toward Samuel Brooks. Not once. Instead, he looked straight ahead with the expression I've come to recognize over decades on the bench, double certainty. Some people mistake confidence for innocence. Experience has taught me they are often very different things. The gallery that morning was unusually crowded. Word had spread quickly through local media after cell phone footage surfaced online showing only a few seconds of an encounter between a police officer and an elderly man. Those few seconds had divided an entire community. One side insisted the officer had followed procedure. The other believed they had witnessed something much darker. The truth, however, rarely lives inside a 15-second video clip. That's why courtrooms exist. As both attorneys organized their files, I noticed something unusual. The defense appeared relaxed, almost too relaxed. Meanwhile, the plaintiff's legal team barely spoke. Lead attorney Rebecca Collins quietly arranged photographs, transcripts, and several sealed evidence envelopes with extraordinary care. Lawyers prepare differently when they know they possess something the other side hasn't anticipated. I made a mental note of it. Years on the bench have taught me to trust those instincts. I opened the proceedings and reminded everyone that public opinion had no place inside my courtroom. Social media doesn't decide facts. Television interviews don't establish evidence. My responsibility was to evaluate testimony, documents, and credibility, nothing more, nothing less. Officer Mitchell testified first. His voice remained steady. According to his account, he had responded to a suspicious person report involving an elderly man lingering near expensive homes late in the evening. He claimed Samuel Brooks ignored lawful commands. He stated he feared the man might be reaching for a weapon. That fear, he argued, justified drawing his firearm. As he spoke, the jury listened carefully, so did I. But something bothered me, not what he said, how he said it. His answers sounded rehearsed, polished to perfection, almost identical to language lifted from a training manual. Real memories usually contain imperfections. Prepared stories rarely do. Then I turned my attention to Samuel Brooks. He hadn't interrupted once. He hadn't shaken his head. He hadn't whispered to his attorney. He simply sat there, hands folded over his cane, staring quietly at the witness stand. That silence was louder than any objection. I've learned that people who carry genuine trauma often conserve their energy. They don't waste emotion correcting every statement. They wait for the moment they're finally invited to speak. Still, I couldn't draw conclusions, not yet, Justice demands patience even when instinct whispers otherwise. Then Attorney Collins stood. She walked toward the witness stand without a single sheet of paper in her hands, no notes, no script, just one simple question. Officer Mitchell, before we discuss what happened that evening, would you please tell the court why your department failed to include the complete body camera recording in your original evidence submission? For the first time that morning, Officer Ryan Mitchell blinked, only once. But after decades behind this bench, I recognized exactly what I had just witnessed. It was the first crack in a story that had seemed unbreakable, and I had the unmistakable feeling that everyone inside my courtroom, including me, was about to learn something none of us had expected. The longer I serve on the bench, the more I realize that a courtroom is not a stage for dramatic speeches. It's a place where tiny details become enormous truths. A delayed answer, a clenched jaw, a witness who suddenly forgets something they remembered perfectly 5 minutes earlier.
Well,
Officer Ryan Mitchell had just shown me the first sign that his confidence wasn't as solid as it appeared. If you have ever wondered how experienced judges detect deception, let me tell you something. We don't decide people are lying because they look nervous. Innocent people become nervous in court every single day. What catches my attention is when confidence suddenly changes the moment an unexpected question is asked. That's exactly what happened. Attorney Rebecca Collins didn't raise her voice. She simply repeated the question. Officer Mitchell, why wasn't the complete body camera recording submitted with your initial report? The officer cleared his throat. My understanding was that only the relevant portion was necessary. Relevant, that single word echoed in my mind. Who decides what's relevant? An officer under investigation or the court? His attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, the missing footage has no bearing on the incident involving my client drawing his firearm. I looked directly at him. I'll decide what has bearing on this case. The courtroom became quiet again. Those words weren't meant to embarrass counsel. They were a reminder of something every courtroom must respect. Evidence belongs to the pursuit of truth, not to whichever side finds it most convenient. Attorney Collins walked toward the evidence table and placed a sealed envelope before the clerk. I'd like to introduce the complete body camera recording obtained through subpoena. That sentence changed the atmosphere instantly. I noticed Officer Mitchell shift in his chair. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have seen it. His shoulders, which had been square and relaxed all morning, tightened ever so slightly. His attorney leaned over and whispered something into his ear. Mitchell nodded, but it wasn't the confident nod he'd worn since entering my courtroom. This one looked uncertain. I've watched enough trials to know when someone begins calculating rather than remembering. Before allowing the video to be played, I asked Attorney Collins a simple question. Counsel, are you representing that this recording is complete and unedited? Yes, Your Honor. And you've established chain of custody? Yes. The defense objected again, arguing the additional footage was cumulative and unnecessary. I denied the objection. The jury deserved to see everything, not pieces, not highlights. Everything. But before the clerk could dim the courtroom lights, Attorney Collins surprised everyone. Your Honor, before the jury watches the recording, I'd like Mr. Samuel Brooks to testify. That wasn't the order I expected. Normally, attorneys prefer to let powerful evidence speak first. Instead, she wanted the elderly plaintiff to speak before anyone saw the video. I allowed it. Samuel Brooks slowly rose from his chair. The bailiff instinctively stepped forward, ready to help him to the witness stand. But Mr. Brooks smiled gently. I've made it this far on my own. There wasn't arrogance in his voice, only quiet determination. As he settled into the witness chair, I watched every juror. Several leaned forward. People instinctively recognize sincerity. Before a single word is spoken, Attorney Collins began softly. Mr. Brooks, where were you going on the evening of October 14th? He adjusted his glasses. My wife's grave. No one moved. My Eleanor passed away 6 years ago. Every Friday evening, I bring fresh flowers. His voice never cracked. That somehow made it even more emotional. He explained that he'd stopped at a neighborhood florist before driving to the cemetery. On the way, he noticed one of the flower ribbons had come loose. He parked beneath a streetlight to fix the arrangement before continuing. I figured she'd deserve flowers that looked nice. He smiled for just a moment. I still talk to her every Friday. I've heard countless stories from witness stands. Very few felt as genuine as that one. Attorney Collins continued. Were you committing any crime? No, ma'am. Did you threaten anyone? No. Did you have a weapon? Samuel slowly reached into his jacket pocket. Immediately, Officer Mitchell's attorney objected. I raised a hand. Slowly, Mr. Brooks. He nodded respectfully and removed a worn leather wallet. From inside it, he carefully unfolded a faded photograph. My wife. He looked down at it for several seconds before placing it on the witness stand. I was reaching for this when the officer started yelling. The courtroom remained silent. He explained that Officer Mitchell ordered him to put his hands in the air almost immediately after exiting the patrol vehicle. Samuel tried to explain why his hand had moved toward his pocket. He never had the chance. The next thing I saw, he paused, was the barrel of a gun pointed at my face. His granddaughter lowered her head in the gallery. Angela Brooks quietly wiped away tears she had been fighting since the hearing began. Still, Samuel never raised his voice. You know what scared me most, Judge? He looked directly at me. It wasn't dying. Another pause. It was realizing that after 78 years of trying to do everything right, someone still looked at me and saw a threat. I have spent decades reminding juries that emotion alone cannot decide a case, but neither can we ignore authentic human experience. Every juror was watching him now, even Officer Mitchell. For the first time all day, the officer finally looked directly at Samuel Brooks. Their eyes met for only a second. Samuel looked heartbroken. Mitchell looked uneasy. That difference mattered. Attorney Collins returned to counsel table without another question. She didn't need one. Sometimes restraint is more powerful than persuasion. I turned toward the defense. Your witness. Officer Mitchell's attorney stood confidently, buttoned his jacket, and approached the witness stand with the unmistakable look of someone preparing to dismantle an elderly man's testimony. I had seen that strategy succeed before, but something about Samuel Brooks told me this cross-examination wasn't going to unfold the way the defense expected, and I was beginning to suspect that the complete body camera footage wasn't the only surprise waiting inside my courtroom. I have learned that cross-examination is where carefully rehearsed stories begin to unravel. A witness may withstand direct examination with confidence, but once every assumption is challenged, even the smallest inconsistency can grow into a crack no explanation can repair. As defense attorney Mark Ellison approached the witness stand, I noticed his confidence had returned. He carried only a yellow legal pad, leaving every exhibit behind. That usually signals one thing. The attorney believes words alone will win the battle. He stopped a few feet from Samuel Brooks and offered a courteous smile. Mr. Brooks, you testified that you were simply arranging flowers for your late wife's grave. Is that correct? Yes, you understand that the officer was responding to a report of a suspicious individual. I understand that's what he says. Ellison nodded as if expecting that answer. So you agree Officer Mitchell had a duty to investigate? Samuel looked at him calmly. I never said he shouldn't investigate. A few jurors exchanged glances. The answer wasn't defensive. It was measured. Ellison changed direction. When the officer instructed you to raise your hands, did you immediately comply? Samuel paused. I tried. I was holding flowers in one hand and my cane in the other. The attorney walked a slow circle before the jury. So your hands were not visible. They were visible. But they were occupied. Yes, and yet you still reached toward your jacket. Samuel looked directly at him. I reached for my wife's picture because I thought if he understood where I was going, he'd stop yelling. The courtroom remained silent. Ellison immediately seized on the statement. So you ignored a police command? No, you reached into your pocket. After trying to explain myself, you made a movement the officer interpreted as dangerous. Samuel's answer came without hesitation. I made a movement no reasonable person would mix for a weapon if they had taken one extra second to look. I watched several jurors write that sentence down. Years on the bench have taught me something about credibility. Truthful witnesses rarely rush to defend themselves. They answer what they're asked and allow others to judge the meaning. Samuel Brooks was doing exactly that. Defense counsel pressed harder. You've stated the officer pointed a firearm at you almost immediately. Yes, you expect this jury to believe an experienced police officer drew his weapon without justification? Samuel's expression softened. I wish I didn't. For the first time, Attorney Ellison had no immediate follow-up. He glanced briefly toward Officer Ryan Mitchell before continuing. Did Officer Mitchell ever fire his weapon? No, so you suffered no physical injury from the firearm itself. Samuel lowered his eyes for a moment. There are injuries doctors can't see. That answer lingered in the courtroom. I noticed juror number 6 slowly place her pen on the table. No one spoke, no one moved. Ellison thanked the witness and returned to the defense table, but I could tell he hadn't achieved what he'd intended. Instead of weakening Samuel's testimony, he'd allowed the jury to hear the quiet dignity behind it. The prosecution then asked to admit additional exhibits, photographs of the scene, dispatch records, and radio communications from the night in question. Each piece fit neatly with Samuel's account. Still, one question remained unanswered. Why had Officer Mitchell drawn his weapon so quickly? That answer, everyone knew, rested inside the complete body camera recording. The courtroom lights dimmed, the clerk moved toward the evidence monitor, every juror turned to face the screen. Officer Mitchell sat perfectly still, but I noticed something he couldn't hide. His right hand tightened into a fist beneath the counsel table. After decades of presiding over trials, I've come to recognize that gesture. It is often the last attempt to maintain control before the truth arrives. I looked across the courtroom one final time, no whispers, no movement, only anticipation. Then the clerk pressed play. The first appeared on the screen. And within seconds I realized this case was about to become something none of us had expected. I have often said that evidence does not speak because it is loud. It speaks because it is complete. As the body camera recording began to play, every eye in the courtroom fixed on the screen, the video showed Officer Ryan Mitchell's patrol car turning onto a quiet residential street. The dispatcher could be heard saying only that a caller had reported an elderly man standing near parked vehicles. There was no mention of a weapon, no report of violence, and no indication that anyone had been threatened. Officer Mitchell stepped out of his vehicle. Before Samuel Brooks had taken more than 2 steps, the officer shouted, "Hands where I can see them!" Samuel immediately turned toward the voice. In one hand, he held a bouquet of flowers, in the other, his wooden cane. He appeared confused, not aggressive. The video then captured something that had never appeared in the short clips circulated online. Samuel tried to speak. "I'm just going to my wife's." He never finished the sentence. Officer Mitchell drew his firearm before Samuel completed those 4 words. The courtroom remained silent. The footage continued. Samuel slowly reached toward his jacket, saying, "It's a picture." Instead of allowing him to finish, Officer Mitchell shouted another command. A second patrol unit arrived less than 30 seconds later. The newly arrived officer immediately assessed the situation. His first words were unmistakable. "Ryan, he's holding flowers." That single sentence changed everything. The prosecution then introduced radio logs confirming that no witness had ever reported Samuel Brooks carrying a weapon. The original caller testified that they had simply thought an elderly man looked lost and requested a welfare check, not an armed response. The defense argued that Officer Mitchell made a split-second decision under stress. I carefully considered that argument. Police officers often face uncertain and dangerous situations, and the law recognizes that reality. But the law also requires that force be objectively reasonable. In this case, the complete evidence showed that Samuel Brooks never threatened the officer, never made a sudden aggressive movement, and repeatedly attempted to explain why he was there. After reviewing the testimony, the video, and every exhibit admitted into evidence, I delivered my ruling. I found that Officer Mitchell had acted unreasonably by escalating the encounter without sufficient justification. Judgment was entered in favor of Samuel Brooks. The court awarded damages for the emotional harm caused by the unlawful encounter, and I ordered that the complete body camera recording remain part of the public record for transparency. Before adjourning, I looked toward Samuel Brooks. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't celebrating. He simply held the same faded photograph of his late wife. Justice, I have learned, cannot erase fear. It cannot give someone back the sense of security they lost in a single moment. What it can do is acknowledge the truth and hold people accountable under the law. As the courtroom emptied, I remained seated for a moment longer. Cases like this remind us that authority carries immense responsibility. Public trust depends not only on enforcing the law, but on exercising judgment with restraint, fairness, and respect for every person's dignity. That is a lesson every courtroom and every community should remember.